Hey guys, welcome to my channel. This is my first video, and well, I'm going to be reviewing kind of this kit that I got, that I bought out of pocket. Um, in addition to that, I'll be kind of talking about the build list and the things that I had to get for this kit. So if you are interested in getting one of these kits, please watch this video because this will have quite a bit of information about the research and things that I had to do to get this kit running. So yeah, if you could like and subscribe and share it if you have friends that are interested in this kind of things, you know just share it around. The more people that know about this stuff, the greater the firearms community becomes as a whole. More knowledge, more power to everybody that's in the community, and we all want that, especially right now. So thanks guys, and enjoy the video. All right, I will be putting photos, reference photos of this particular rifle, the T65, the Taiwanese T65, at the beginning of this. I do not have the most sophisticated of editing software, so for now I will be using what I have, and that is editing on a mobile phone for the time being. So that is what we will get. So first off, I will show the reference photos. There will be pictures of the K2 versions, which I will explain later on as I go into the video a little bit more. But yeah, please enjoy the video, and thank you for watching. Well, hello, my fellow Americans. Today, I kind of wanted to bring up a little piece of history, which is this little guy. This is a Taiwanese T65, and there are different versions of this rifle. In particular, there's the K2, which actually has a carry handle much like the M16, but it's styled a little bit differently. Yeah, and as you can see, there's some little differences from a standard M16 or even M4 style rifle. And I will put an M4 clone. It's not a direct copy, it's more of a close copy of an M4. As you can see, there's the shell deflector. This does not have a shell deflector. Forward assist, no forward assist. Do not use the lower as a representation of what the lower was like. This is 2021, so getting anything authentic or accurately close to what was the actual lower is near unobtainium at this point, so I had to build it with what I had. The only thing that is original from the fire control group is the pins and the trigger, and that is something I kind of want to look at. A small difference between a standard M4 and Taiwanese T65 trigger is that rear notch cut. So if you notice, this has much more material. A slightly different concept of how to make the trigger. They have this extra material back here to, I'm not really sure what the purpose of it is, but it's there. I don't know if it was for aesthetic or just personal preference. I would think that would cause problems because something could get in there and block your trigger from being able to be pulled. So something else to note on this is the sights. So if we look down them here, I think you can see that. They're rather fine sights. Very nice sights. The only thing I will say that I do not like is this rear night sight. The only reason for that is this particular T65 kit came with a damaged rear sight. So as you can see, it will not go up fully on its own. You have to really push it into place. And that's because this left ear has been dinged in from use, and I don't want to try and bend that back. There are so few of these in existence today, especially in the United States, that we can take a look at for reference, especially in functioning form, that I don't want to try and mess with that. So we're going to leave that the way it is. Let's move on down. Now, some people might complain about my job on this, on pinning the front sight base. The reason why these are different is because they had slightly different tapers, which was odd. You know, typically, like on an M16, the taper pins are fairly concentric with each other. They have the same general profile, so that, you know, you create your taper using the same reamer. Well, these had a slightly different taper degree-wise, as well as having one was slightly wider, which is this front one. Oh, actually this one right here. So I made the mistake of reaming it for the large one, the one that was larger. So reamed it for the large one, and I didn't realize this one was under spec. And as you can see, it came out the other side. Now it's still pinned in, and that pin's not going anywhere. So that is something that is unfortunate. After I did that, I was just curious. You know, to my fault, I should have measured these before I put the pins in, and I didn't, you know. But I measured them after the fact, and I realized, oh man, that's not good. So I had to do what I could with what I have. So that is the way it looks. So that's just how it's going to have to be for now. So until I could get a different set of pins, but then they wouldn't be the originals. It wouldn't have the same finish, wear, wouldn't have the same patina. And that's a very small detail that I can live with it not being, you know, perfectly flush with each other, you know. And it's not in the way of where it'll catch on stuff. So something to note. I want to address the fact that, you know, I'm not saying, you know, I love Mishako. Love his videos. He's a great YouTuber for gun information. He has lots of knowledge on firearms. However, me being a machinist, I would like to give some knowledge in the regards of what barrel I used to rebuild this, because in his video, his initial video, he said it needs a different gas port location. That is not the case. You can take an M16A2 barrel, which that's what this is. I could not find an A1 anywhere. They're not for sale. People, they aren't making them because they're focusing on, you know, government profile barrels, or just AR-15 profile barrels, 750 diameter really. They aren't focusing on the 5/8 profile, and that's what this is. So I took a Delton M16A2 profile pencil barrel, took it, and as you can see, I machined it down. I needed to machine down the front for clearance. They had this flared for the crush washer, for a modern crush washer. I machined it down just enough to give it clearance. It has about a 5 thou clearance, so it slides right over it, no problem. This is press fit on, so this I had to take a dead blow and tap it on. The way I did this is actually I took a gauge pin. Gauge pins, they measure the diameter of a hole precisely. Which this one was a 96 thousandths or 97 thousandths diameter hole. Anyway, I stuck that gauge pin in there and indicated that gauge pin flat. So I knew that when I drilled and then reamed these taper holes, they're perfectly in alignment with that gas port hole. So that's how I did that. There's a plethora of ways to do it, and there's less precise ways that still essentially do the same thing. But I wanted to make sure that this front sight aligned beautifully with that rear sight, and it does. As you saw earlier, it sits right in the middle. If you're wondering what sling I have on here, it's just a cheap AK sling I had sitting around. It's nothing fancy. It's not the M16 silent sling. It's just a copy of a AK sling, a really cheap copy. So I'll probably change that out in the future, but it's there for now. Something I want to note on the flash hider. The flash hider is interesting because it's an M16 A1, or let me rephrase that, it's an A1 flash hider, not an A2, like we all know, A2 bird cage. It's what comes on most mil-spec ARs. This is an A1's profile bird cage. However, this A1 is a little bit different. So if you look here, on a standard A1 or even an A2, this cut is further back a little bit into this first ring right here where my thumb is touching. Which actually I'll grab my Palmetto State here just as an example. It's the same on my M16A1, but as you can see, it goes slightly back into that ring, whereas on the Taiwanese it does not. So just a little small idiosyncrasy that's different between the two. Now to go back to the front sight, just something to notice. This is the night sight, which that's pretty cool. Obviously the tritium's dead. So that's your front night sight that goes right along with your rear night sight right here. That flips up and down. I'm not gonna force that right now. You've already seen what it does. So this is it's got more of an AR 18 or an AR 180 design piston system. It's kind of cool because Eugene Stoner, you know, you got to give the guy credit where credit's due. Yes, many people know him for the M16 family of rifles, but you think about it, a lot of modern weapons today incorporate his systems. And, you know, I'll also give credit to Kalashnikov. A lot of weapons incorporate his designs and his systems. However, that's for a different video. But there's really a lot of weapons that you would not think would have anything to do with Eugene Stoner, and yet they do. They have a lot of commonalities with a lot of his prototype weapons. So just something kind of cool about the guy. I'm gonna move back here again. Just something else I want to note. This has more of an A1 style grip. It is a little bit thicker. They use a different material. Obviously you can see this one's in rough shape. It's at a beating. As well as the stock. Now this, I'm at a bit of a conundrum here, or a bit of a debacle, or whatever you want to call it. I don't want to ruin the patina of it, you know, pull away the history of it, the things it's seen, the things it's done. However, some of the parts on this are rusting fairly good. You can't see that screw, that top screw too well, the rust on it. That is because I cleaned that fairly well. I didn't want to throw it in Evaporust. Evaporust is a great product, don't get me wrong. But it does change the color of the bare metal to like a light gray. And I don't want to permanently change the color unless I'm going to get it completely refinished. So I don't want to darken the metal where it isn't supposed to be darkened. So it would ultimately change the patina anyway. So I did oil up these parts. I brushed them with just a nylon brush to keep them from rusting anymore. And you'll see more parts that are experiencing this as we go along. Now, some parts I did have to add to this because these were so rough. I mean, these kits were extremely rough. I don't know where they got them from. I know some of these showed up in El Salvador. I know some showed up in Haiti because there are police departments and photos from different conflicts that, you know, these have emerged, you know, in those photos from those time frames. So those are the two places I could see. There's probably other places these have shown up that I'm unaware of. I believe some either went to Africa or the Middle East. Do not quote me on that. But these have shown up in very small quantities in these civil wars that have occurred, you know, in a lot of third world countries. So these have kind of an unappreciated history behind them. But to get back to the parts I replaced, one is the dust cover. As you can see, the dust cover looks very nice. This one came without its dust cover. Standard mil-spec Ar-15 dust cover will work just fine. That's what I put on here. Nothing fancy. Just a cheap $7 assembly. Same thing with this. This is just an Anderson Manufacturing lower trigger guard. It's the exact same as what the Taiwanese used. I mean, there's very little difference between the Taiwanese and the M16 family of rifles trigger guards, if any at all. So I put that on there. The other thing I did replace was the buffer, and that is for a very good reason, as we will see here in a second. I'm actually going to grab that buffer here really quick. All right, here it is. I actually have to get, these pins are not exactly reamed, or I should rephrase that, they aren't true dowel pins, because that's what these really are. Your takedown pins are like a dowel pin. That front one is not truly to size. They had different tolerance acceptances than the M16. That doesn't mean that the parts won't fit, but you may have a tough time. So in particular, this front sight, not this front sight, but front takedown pin, I really have to, this makes it even more difficult. There we go. This makes it, it does not come out. I actually ripped a chunk of my fingernail off, and as you can see, I don't have long fingernails, as I shouldn't. So there's our new buffer. It's holding up just fine. It's just a standard rifle buffer. Oh, come on, baby. Yep, so this is the original buffer spring. I actually checked it, it's within spec, lengthwise. This is the old buffer. They ran this ragged. I don't know what material they replaced this with at some point. I don't know if it's plastic. I assume it is. It's very brittle plastic, whatever they chose. And I think, if you can see right there, if I can get the camera to focus, they glued, they glued that in. And they didn't mind leaving extra glue on the sides. So this buffer is garbage. It's junk. There's no pin for me to knock out to remove this, so I can't replace it. So at this point, if I don't want to damage the buffer tube, I can't use this. So this is out of the gun. So boo-hoo, but I'm not going to leave broken parts in a historic gun, because there's a lot more to a gun than just keeping it preserved. There's a lot of things you understand from it, just kind of like Ian McCollum said from Forgotten Weapons. You learn a lot by shooting it, and you really do. So this, I want people to be able to shoot it, to learn, to know what it is, because since there's so few of these and not a lot of people know about them, it's really cool. You know, if someone gets the opportunity, the experience to see it, to shoot it, to feel it, to understand, you know, kind of what it was. So I replaced all of the springs except for the buffer spring. Buffer spring is original, as you can see. Now this little guy gave me some trouble, which is our mag catch, or not mag catch, I should say, our bolt catch. So the reason that was is, I don't know if I can get this to focus. Sorry guys, I'm doing this with a phone. That's rust. I cleaned this off very gently, got all the rust off, threw it in, had it oiled. It already it oxidized. It already had started to rust. So we had magazine lock open issues. I did spray the crap out of this with oil and just sat there and worked it and pulled the bolt back and, excuse me, pulled the bolt back with a magazine in it to lock the bolt open and just worked it till it functioned. So I am hoping that will remain the case. As you can see, it's much more free now. But before, occasionally when you push in, it would either stay stuck up or it would not come up at all, and it would be difficult. So there's that. Something else to note. I don't know what this says. I am not sure what it means. but I am very curious. I don't know if it says toucan, I'm not sure, but I am very curious. So now, kind of moving on with the disassembly here. Just for note, this is a Cero Forge 80% receiver. It sucks, since I'm not 21, I cannot buy a lower receiver yet. So I had to make one to make this kit work. So we've pretty much matched our necessary USA-made components. We have more than 10 parts on this, including all the springs, the buffer, the barrel, the receiver, all of that. So this thing's good to go. Note, this head spaced beautifully. It ate the go gauge and did not eat the no-go gauge, which is right there. That's what you want. All right, just for people to experience what a pain in the rear this is. Without the gas rings on a normal Ar-15, this is how easy the bolt comes out. Yeah, you have no idea how many times I went to just check parts, see how everything was fitting when I was putting this together, and this thing would just dump out with the upper and lower part. So if you ever get one of these, be aware of that. That way, if you have to ever disassemble it at the range and clean it, you don't have it dump out on you on the range into the dirt. That really sucks. Here's the charging handle. I will note, just as a machinist, you can tell this is not a forging. This was machined out of a piece of aluminum. I mean, you can see the tool marks right there. That looks like side milling, the way the tooling marks are. That looks like a side milling job right there. And this, obviously, you can see where the end mill came in and cleaned this up. So, very neat little piece right there. We're going to take off the handguard, boys and girls, and we're going to learn something about this thing's piston system here. I don't have that screw on there terribly tight, and if you hear a screwdriver touch the side of that handguard, for all of you history purists, or, oh, not history purists, but more of purists of protecting the parts on this, another scratch is not going to add to the patina of this. All right, it's seen better days. All right, and I will show you why it's seen better days. As you can see, I had to oil this piston. Why? Because it's pitted. Let's see. I think you can see that right there. But this was in very poor conditions. And a lot of the parts on this that are steel started pitting, unfortunately, at some point in the life of this rifle. So I'm going to take this off here. Let's get that out of the way. Try and fight the spring with one hand. So this comes back, and that's our piston. It's kind of got a cup up here. This cup catches the gas and is what pushes this back. Now, to disassemble this, we merely pull back, pull it off to the side, and this little guy comes right out. Next, yeah, that's right. I'm new to this too, people, so patience. Next comes this. So next comes your rod. So that comes off. Don't want to get our carpet all oily. And here comes the tappet. All right, and as we can see, we had some really good gas sealing around that tappet. Well, especially on the second and third rings back here. This is out of spec because of the amount of rust it got on it. So at some point, someone, somewhere, sometime, I believe, probably shot corrosive ammo through this, and for an extended period of time did not clean it, which is unfortunate, but that's just how life goes, you know. Something else to note, this lower handguard does not come off. You need the proper tools to remove it. The reason being is the rear band that holds it in is behind the nut, the barrel nut on the rear part. So like in your M16, you can take the handguard off from the rear. You cannot do that on the Taiwanese T65. Oh, yeah, T65. So, and that's the same thing here. This typically is pinned in place. I don't have the rivets or the tools yet, so that's just going to stay like that for now. I don't want to rush along and try and jam something in there that shouldn't be there, or throw like a M3 steel screw through there. I don't want to damage this because there's so few. There's no need to be hasty. But yeah, this is basically the Taiwanese T65. There's not a lot of these. There's not a lot of information on them. They were, just as a brief history, like I'm not forgotten weapons. I don't know as much about this as I would like to, just simply because of the lack of information on these. There's just yeah, there's not a lot of information. So these were adopted primarily because Taiwan saw the stuff going on in Vietnam. Not that they wanted to protect themselves from communist takeover. I mean, that's obviously what they want to do. But their biggest problem was the reliability issues. And just to note, in this section up ahead, sorry I chopped this up. I just wanted to make people aware. That way everything's accurate. I noticed I didn't mention what I was referring to when I was talking about reliability. I was referring to the M16 reliability during Vietnam. And all the debacle and stuff that, all the stuff that occurred during that. It had nothing to do with the reliability of the T65. It was because there's heavy American influence that basically helped develop this rifle. They didn't want any part of the M16 direct impingement system, which isn't truly direct impingement, but that's for a different day. But anyway, just wanted to clear that up real quick, and yeah. Of course, they weren't in on all the ins and outs on that. They didn't know the stuff that was going on, with the Ordnance Department that was causing a lot of the problems, quite frankly. So they're just like, we're just going to stick with something that we're familiar with, or something that we know works, and that's, you know, the piston system. So they incorporated that into the M16. Don't quote me on this, but I do believe this is the first piston-driven AR-15 variant, or M16. It's not a direct M16 family variant. I mean, it's in a class of its own, but it's a derivative of the AR-15, either way you look at it, because there is parts interchangeability. So I believe it is the earliest piston-driven AR-15. So the concept's been around for a long time. You know, it didn't just come around recently. That's kind of the crazy thing. So people were thinking about making the AR-15 piston-driven way back. So yeah, these have been around the block. They've been in a couple different places, and there's relatively few of them in the United States. So I'll add in shooting footage here, just to kind of show how it shoots. I am really pleased with how this build turned out. And I would recommend it if you are going to do one of these builds, just get the proper tools. You don't want to botch one of these, especially at the price point too. They're $1,100 and $1,200, I think, right around that price point, with maybe a plus or minus some play in price. So these are on hkparts.net. These kits, that's where I got mine. It's the ones that Misha Co. Had mentioned, and the primary reason I wanted to make this video was just to let builders know you can use just a standard A1 or A2 profile barrel. If you use an A2, you just have to machine it down, but your port location is pretty much in the same place. Because the port size on the front sight base is smaller than on your standard AR-15 barrel, even if, because this measures out a little bit thicker, this rear band measures out a little bit thicker than your M16 band, even if it pushes the hole forward a little bit, it won't harm it, because you're still having complete and full access for gas to go into this front sight post to operate the system and drive the bolt back. And just real quick, for you tactical Timmies out there that are interested in trigger pull, this has a standard mil-spec AR-15 trigger, in terms of poundage, that is. Got a little bit of creep, it's steady build-up, brakes nice and clean. Okay, I reset it, and we'll listen and see where it resets. Right there. So, yep, that's your T65 trigger. Last thing, I swear, I'll tear down the bolt. So, this is probably, crossing my fingers, this is one of the easier bolts I've ever had to disassemble. And I might even be able to do this with one hand. So we'll try that. Oh, yeah, come on, come on. There we go. That pin came out fairly easily. There's our firing pin. Just your standard AR-15 style firing pin. It's nothing. There's no bells or whistles or anything spectacular. And that's the nice thing about this. There are a lot of parts available to replace. Now, there's some things that you can't obviously replace, but there are things you can. And one in particular is the bolt. If you ever have your bolt go out on you on the T65, I would have to imagine merely putting in a a gas ring bolt head would potentially fix the problem. I don't take my word for it, but I'm sure in time someone will have to or has tried it. They look fairly similar. The only difference is this does not have the gas rings, since it does not need gas rings. There's no gas being put into the system, so it doesn't need to seal it to direct the gas to go a certain way. So that's kind of our bolt. And the last thing of note I will show on this bolt is that little guy right there. And that is what your piston smacks. So basically where you have your gas key right here, all your gas goes back into here, opens up the bolt or pushes your bolt carrier, this nice long piece, to unlock the bolt. So this just has that. Two other features to note that are different than the M16 family of bolts. This does not have the gas holes, and that's actually to vent gas out the side. That's to help release extra gases. It's more of like a safety thing, I would have to say, on an M16, but since you aren't having gas come back into the bolt, you don't need that on this, so they left that out. So there's none of those holes, as you can see. This also does not have the cuts on the side for a forward assist, because it does not have one. So I would have to believe, if you ever had one of these carriers ever break at some point, you'd be able to get a bolt carrier group that does not have this the forward assist. You know, there's companies that make them that don't have the 4 to 6 cuts, and if anything, if worst came to worst, you could machine something that would spec out to where this needs to be, and you would just have to torque it down on that carrier, replacing the gas key basically. So you could effectively, in theory, you could use an M16 bolt in this, although it would need some modification. So, and that would just be to keep this running. If you wanted to preserve this bolt, you could try and tinker with an M16 bolt, which I might do in the future, just to help preserve the original parts, the original components. But for now, I have what I have, and as original parts, they performed flawlessly for the limited testing I did. It is the ammo crunch of 2021 and 2020, I should say, but yeah, you guys all know about that, so cool beans. Thanks, guys. Taiwanese T65, baby. So got this built, had the Delton barrel on it, machined it down to accept a 625 diameter gas block, which is what the T65 takes. It takes a A1 profile barrel, and because it's 2021, you can't just buy them right now. So I had to buy an A2, machine it down, and hopefully everything's good to go. So we're gonna test fire this bad boy. See the steam coming off. I had to oil everything up here. The tool I had, this has a different barrel nut than your standard Delta ring, and I was using just one of the universal AR tools, and I actually snapped the ear off as I was tightening it. So I did have the torque setting set in the middle of the recommended torque settings, because I think it's from either 25 or 35 up to 65. That's the acceptable torque range that your barrel can be at. So it snapped off when I had it set to 40. So I'm hoping that that stays in place, and we'll, you know, kind of check and see how it works out in the end. So yeah. So we're gonna try and just get a better group with this and actually take our time. Just something to note. This, as stated earlier, this thing is in rough shape. Someone dumped this at some point, and actually the front, or the left post here, the left ear that protects that rear sight is bent inward. And so me being a machinist, I don't want to whack that back because I don't know the exact material this is made out of. If they cast these and then machine them, because if you can see here, this is not it looks like parts of this are not forged. And if it is, it's either a crude forging or a crude casting, because you can even see right there where they belt sanded part of the upper receiver down so it would sit flush, or so it wouldn't be so rough. So that leads me to believe it could be more of a casting, because you know you don't see that on forgings where they just whack it off. So taking that into consideration, that the sights have been hit and beaten around quite a bit, I don't expect it to be the most accurate, but as we saw earlier, it grouped fairly well. So we're just going to try it and see how it goes. And to everyone who's like, oh, that's a super rare gun and you shouldn't be shooting that, you know, that should be in a museum. Well, as far as I know, there is no documented footage of this gun ever being fired within the USA. The only footage I found was the military footage of the Taiwanese military, you know, promoting their gun, their new rifle. And there's only one scene of that, and the dude's just mag dumping the gun. You know, just spraying it. You know, that doesn't tell us anything about it. So I'm kind of wanting to get a little bit more shooting footage of the gun so people can know how it operates, what it's doing, you know, see the different features, you know, just get a better understanding for this gun, because there's not a lot of information about it. And that being said, this is piston driven too, so it has its own piston system in there, which I'll show later, but we'll get into the shooting here and see how it goes. I don't know how many rounds that was. Actually, we got 2 more rounds. I'm just going to shoot them. Did not lock open. Again, as you can probably see here, if we get in real close, there's light surface rust. I did not want to take a brush or anything to that. I didn't even want to throw it in Evapor Rust, which it's not an aggressive chemical, that destroys the metal, but what it does to the steel is it grays it. So it almost gives it like a chemical finish, and I didn't want to change the worn finish on this. So I touched it up with some oil and tried cleaning off the rust, but as you can see, there is a little bit of orange there where it started oxidizing again. So at some point, this may just need to get, unfortunately, refinished, because I don't want this to, over time, start affecting the rifle itself. You know, I want to be able to preserve the parts, so this, you know, can continue to operate and even have the original features. One of them being, like on this, on a traditional M16, this V cut right here is cut further up. So if I grab the M16 actually really quick, M16A1, you will notice right there, that's cut further up. So that's a distinct feature that this bolt hold open has. All right, so that concentrated fire that I took, and that was actually about 20 rounds. I have astigmatism, so I already have trouble with iron sights. That is how well that rifle grouped, right there. This is at maybe 30, 35 yards. That's kind of pushing it, so 30 yards I would just say. That's like a very conservative estimate. You know, not very far. That's a really good grouping. I mean, we're cutting holes with that barrel with the old iron sights. So, and that's just the Vimpel Golden Tiger. I think I'm pronouncing that incorrectly, but yeah, you know, it's just cheap ammo, and that's grouping really well. So that just shows you the capabilities of that gun. To be fair, I did make sure and headspace it before we fired this prior, so it is in good headspace. Used a go-no-go gauge. Go gauge fine, no-go gauge did not close on it, so it has a nice tight chamber. So you know, it's not a field gauged condition gun. It is like almost out of the factory, you know, new, good to go with that new barrel. And that's surprising too with how old that bolt is too. I would have thought that the wear on it would have affected the headspace a little bit more, but it did just fine. So I'd say that's a win for the T65 right there.
The sight was looking up as I was shooting it.
I had that problem too. Yeah, I'd like to note that this is shooting at consistently like 5 o'clock.
Nice.
How's the recoil impulse?
Very nice.
It's a lot better than I would say on a carbine.
It didn't last round hold open.
Yeah, well, that's because the I have to oil the bolt hold open.
All right.
Because it's actually, there's a bunch of rust that was on it, and I cleaned it off, but it's still rough.
It's still sticking.
Yeah, so
okay.
I just got to put some oil in there. But yeah, that thing's beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it's a shooter kit for sure, even though they're rare, because the parts on it are pitted.
It's super hot up here, and you can burn your... I almost burned myself right there.
I will note that's one of the things the Taiwanese military said, was that the handguards sucked, basically.
Because this is so open, I just shoved my skin through there.
Yeah.
So
Well, and the other thing,
I want to stay underneath and back here.
but you also don't have the aluminum heat shields like a lot of the M16s did.
Yeah.
That just has an aluminum paint on the inside.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's an interesting gun, but I can see why they quickly switched to the I think it's the K2.
Yeah.
Which actually they changed that to an actual carry handle, and then changed the internals of the handguard. So, but yeah,
cool.
So thank you guys for watching. Yeah, this was a several week project. And this all came out of pocket. I was not endorsed by anybody. You know, when I mentioned HK Parts, you know, they aren't sponsoring this. Delton's not sponsoring this. I'm letting you guys know about the things that I experienced going through making this. You know, and of course there's still things I have to learn. But to wrap up, you know, this was a fun build. I have more stuff coming. I have a video that I'll probably be doing on the M16A1 build I did. That was fun too. I just made both of the barrels at the same time, but anyway, I'll mention that in the actual video of that. So thank you guys for watching. If you'd like to subscribe, please subscribe, like the video, all that good stuff. Great to have you guys here learning about something that is unique to the United States. So go out there, just be a positive reinforcement in the world, especially with the stuff going on right now, guys. You know, and just take care of your family. You know, if you're into this kind of stuff, you know, take some time that you would put for a hobby or for something you do, and just put it aside to go talk to someone that might need talked to, or, you know, visit with family, because you never know when the last day will be the last day. All right, so God bless, and yeah, thanks for watching.